In the heart of London, behind the glass walls and polished steel of one of the world's most advanced hospitals, lies a patient who has never spoken. Not once. Not to the doctors, not to the nurses, not even to her own family. Yet every night she is heard. Staff avoid her room. Security cameras fail when pointed at her bed. Records of her admission are scattered, incomplete, as though someone never wanted the truth to be known. This is the story of the silent patient, and why Cleveland Clinic London may be keeping its most terrifying secret. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll question whether you'd ever step foot inside this hospital again. Cleveland Clinic London opened its doors with a promise: world-class medicine, advanced technology, a place where lives would be saved and healing restored. The exterior is glass and steel, reflecting the city skyline. Inside, spotless corridors stretch in every direction, illuminated by bright white lights. Everything about the place is designed to reassure. Clean, modern, safe. But behind that surface calm, silence presses heavily against the walls. Not the kind of silence you find in a library or a chapel. This silence feels unnatural, like it's waiting. Each footstep against the polished floor echoes longer than it should. Every fluorescent light hums just a little too loud, as though the building itself is holding its breath. The smell of disinfectant lingers constantly in the air, sharp and sterile. For the doctors and patients who fill these wards during the day, it feels ordinary, just the cost of cleanliness. But for those who walk the corridors at night, the odor carries something else. Something heavy. It clings to your skin and makes the hours drag on, each one slower than the last. It was into this world that a young nurse named Elena stepped. Fresh to the night shift, she carried the same determination every new recruit has, the desire to prove herself. She smiled politely, learned the schedules, studied the protocols. But beneath her eagerness, she could not shake the nerves that settled in her chest the moment she entered the hospital after dark. The daytime staff had gone. Patients slept in their beds. The once bustling building now belonged to shadows. Elena would later recall that her very first night felt strangely rehearsed, as though the halls were staging themselves for her arrival. The automatic doors sliding shut behind her. The long corridor stretching out ahead, empty. The faint buzz of electricity running through the walls. Even the elevator seemed to hesitate before opening, as though the building itself was studying her. Her assignment was the intensive care floor, a place of constant vigilance, where machines monitored every heartbeat and breath. She was told her role would be simple: check the charts, record the vitals, respond to alarms. But one thing her supervisors never explained was why the staff always spoke of one patient in whispers. A patient who had been here longer than anyone could remember. A patient who never spoke, and yet was always heard. Before Elena could begin, she was given the usual hospital tour. Every ward spotless, every door secured, every policy carefully explained. And yet, the farther she walked, the heavier the silence seemed to press in. By the time she reached the floor where she would spend her shift, even her own footsteps seemed to betray her. Loud, clumsy, echoing down the halls. She felt as though something, or someone, was listening. That night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Elena stood at the nurse's station with her clipboard in hand. For the first time, she realized just how far she was from the familiar hum of the city outside. The glass windows showed only a black sky. No cars, no lights, no sound. Just her reflection staring back, pale and uncertain. Would you take a night shift in a hospital where patients speak, even when they shouldn't? Subscribe now if your answer is no. At first, Elena's rounds seemed ordinary. The ICU was quiet. Monitors pulsed steadily, their soft glow painting the walls in pale green and blue. Each room was occupied by patients who barely stirred. Machines whispered for them, breathing in rhythm, ticking away the seconds of fragile lives. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed wrong. Until the whispers began. She paused in the middle of the corridor, turning her head sharply. The sound was faint, too soft to be conversation, too distinct to be the hum of machines. It came from the far end of the ward. She followed it, clipboard pressed tightly to her chest. But when she reached the door, it seemed to fade, slipping away as though it had never been there. She opened the room. Empty. The patient was sedated, unmoving, their chest rising slowly with the help of a ventilator. No visitors. No staff. Just the sound of steady breathing. Yet moments before, she was certain she had heard a voice calling. The second time it happened, Elena wasn't alone. A security guard on the night shift joined her at the nurse's station. He pulled up the surveillance feed, scanning the monitors. And there, on the grainy black and white screen, they saw a figure. A patient, thin and frail, standing by the window of room 9. But when Elena rushed down the hall to check, her heart thundering with every step, she found the patient exactly where they had always been, comatose. Tubes running from their arms. Eyes shut, motionless. They had not stood. They could not stand. Yet the cameras had shown otherwise. The guards dismissed it as a glitch. Elena wanted to believe that, but in her gut, she felt the unease grow. The figure she had seen on the screen had not simply stood. It had turned slowly, deliberately, as though aware it was being watched. As though it wanted to be seen. That was when she learned of the one they called the silent patient. A woman admitted years ago under circumstances no one fully explained. Some said she suffered brain damage. Others whispered she had refused to speak since the day of her surgery. Her chart listed no visitors, no history, no end date to her stay. She simply existed, suspended between life and silence. But those who worked here claimed her voice was never absent. They heard it in the halls. They heard it in the rooms. Sometimes they heard it whispering their own names. Elena thought it was just a story, something told to frighten new staff. But then she noticed something strange in the records. Floor maps posted on the walls showed every room, every corridor, every exit. Except one. The number assigned to the silent patient's room was missing. As though the space itself did not exist on paper. A blank corner. A blind spot in a building designed to map every detail. How could a room exist here, and yet not exist at all? The disturbances multiplied. One night, monitors connected to empty beds began spiking wildly, heart rates climbing and falling though no patients were there. Nurses rushed to silence the alarms, baffled to find machines screaming for lives that weren't present. In another ward, a wheelchair rolled slowly out of storage, wheels squeaking as though guided by unseen hands, before coming to a stop in front of the ICU door. Elevators descended to floors no one had called, doors opening to empty hallways. Each time, Elena felt the weight of something building, pressing closer, as though the silence itself had a voice and was choosing its moment to speak. By now, she had heard her name whispered more than once. Always faint, always close, yet never attached to a face. She tried to ignore it, but denial crumbled when it came again, clearer this time. Not from the corridor, not from a camera, from inside the silent patient's room. Her own name spoken softly, slowly, as though the woman inside had been waiting just for her. Elena could not stop thinking about the voice. It lingered in her mind long after she left the ward, repeating softly, unmistakably hers. She needed to understand who this patient was, and why her very presence unsettled an entire floor of the hospital. Her search began with the records office. Patient files were supposed to be detailed, exhaustive. Every surgery, every diagnosis, every family contact meticulously documented. But when she located the file marked with the patient's name, it was thin. Too thin. Barely a few pages where there should have been hundreds. Most shocking of all, the date of admission was more than a decade old. She had been here since the hospital's earliest days. Yet, in all that time, the file listed no discharge plan. No prognosis. Just one note repeated. Observation only. Elena read on. The patient had been admitted following a failed operation. The details were vague, only a line about complications and a reference to an incident during recovery. After that, silence, just like the woman herself. There was mention of family at the time of admission, but the section for emergency contacts had been crossed out. No visits recorded, no relatives listed. To the hospital, she was a living body in a bed, but to Elena, she was quickly becoming something else entirely. When Elena began asking questions among the staff, she noticed the way conversations changed. Some lowered their voices. Others simply walked away. A senior nurse muttered that transfers from the ICU were common. Too many episodes, she called them. When Elena pressed, the woman shook her head and whispered, "Some shifts don't end the way they should." No one explained further. No one dared. But explanations soon came in other forms. One evening, as Elena checked charts, the overhead lights along the corridor flickered. Once. Twice. Then all at once. The entire length of the ICU fell into darkness before surging back with a blinding white glow. For a moment she was certain she had seen movement in that split second of black. Something crossing the hallway. Something tall. Something deliberate. But when the light returned, the corridor was empty. Every door closed. Every bed silent. Another night, She passed by the storage area and froze. A gurney rolled forward, wheels creaking, its path slow but steady. No one pushed it. No one guided it. She stood rigid, watching it wheel itself into the middle of the hall before stopping dead in place, blocking her path. She backed away, her breath unsteady, the clipboard trembling in her hands. But the most disturbing moment came when she returned to the silent patient's room. The woman lay as always, motionless, eyes shut, her skin pale beneath the hospital sheets. Elena adjusted the monitors, recorded the numbers, and looked back just in time to see her lips move. Slow, careful, as though forming words. But no sound came. The air remained still, yet Elena swore she saw her own name form against those silent lips. Later that week, another nurse broke the silence. He had worked the floor longer than most, his face worn, his hands unsteady. He pulled Elena aside and whispered something that chilled her more than the empty halls ever had. "You're hearing her, aren't you?" Elena nodded slowly, uncertain whether to admit it. He glanced toward the room, then leaned closer. "Be careful. The others who left, they didn't leave because of what they saw. They left because of what they heard. She doesn't always use her own voice. Sometimes she uses yours." The thought gnawed at Elena. How could a patient who never spoke find her way into the minds of others, imitating the voices of those who feared her? Was it hallucination? Paranoia? Or something far more impossible? The nurse would say no more. Within a week, he filed for transfer. He would not return to the ICU again. If you don't subscribe, maybe you're braver than the staff who quit after one shift here. Or maybe you just don't believe. By her third week, Elena knew she could no longer observe from a distance. Every passing night, the silent patient became less of a rumor and more of a presence, pressing against her mind. And so, against her better judgment, she made a decision, one that many before her had refused. She would spend her shift inside the patient's ward, alone, all night. The room was colder than the rest of the floor. Not by much, but enough for her breath to catch in the air. She sat at the small desk by the bed, her clipboard resting before her, the monitors softly glowing in the dark. The steady beeps should have been reassuring. Yet within minutes, Elena noticed something deeply wrong. Each sound of the heart monitor began to align with her own pulse. Not the patient's, hers. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rhythm match exactly. Faster when she grew nervous. Slower when she forced herself to breathe. The machine seemed to know her better than she knew herself. The air thickened as the hours dragged on. A metallic taste clung to her tongue, bitter, copper-like, as though the very atmosphere was filled with something unclean. She tried to drink water, but it did nothing. The heaviness persisted. She rubbed her temples, but the pounding in her head only deepened, sinking in time with the beeps that refused to leave her ears. It was then that she noticed the reflection. Across from her, a pane of dark glass caught the faint light of the monitors. She saw herself at the desk, her head lowered, her shoulders tense. But behind her, shadows. They moved back and forth across the glass, pacing slowly, deliberately, as though a crowd was gathering in the space between her and the bed. She spun around. The room was empty. No movement. Just her and the silent patient, lying still beneath the sheets. She stood. Her legs shook. She leaned close to the bed. The patient's face was pale, her skin stretched thin, her mouth shut tight. But then her eyelids twitched. Slowly, painfully they opened. Eyes bloodshot, veins red and raw, unblinking as they fixed directly on Elena. She stumbled back, her chair scraping against the floor. The woman did not move. She did not speak. But her eyes, those eyes, were wide open, staring, watching, refusing to close again. Elena's body screamed to leave, yet her curiosity bound her in place. She turned toward the monitor, needing anything else to look at, and froze. The numbers no longer made sense. Heart rate, oxygen level, blood pressure, all zeros. The machine insisted she was gone. No life, no presence. Yet Elena was staring directly at her, those bloodshot eyes still piercing through the dim light. And then she turned. The bed was empty. She froze. A whisper right behind her. She spun around. The bed sheets lay flat, untouched, as if no one had ever been there at all. Her chest heaved. The monitor continued to record nothing, lines flat and meaningless. She grabbed the patient's file from the desk, tearing it open with shaking hands, desperate for explanation. And there, scrawled in fading ink, she found the detail no one had spoken aloud. The date of death, years earlier. Official. Recorded. The woman in this bed had been declared dead long before Elena ever walked into the ward. her breath caught in her throat. The metallic taste thickened, choking her. She tried to run, but the door would not move. Her knees weakened, her palms slick against the handle. That was when the voices began. First one, soft, then another, louder, then another, overlapping. Dozens of them, rising from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor beneath her feet. Every single one chanting the same thing. Her name, over and over. Elena, Elena, Elena. The sound filled every corner of the room until it seemed impossible that the walls could contain it. Her ears rang. Her chest pounded. She squeezed her eyes shut, but still the voices called her, relentless, endless, inescapable. And in that moment she knew. She was no longer just an observer of the silent patient. She had become the one being called. Elena tore herself from the room, her hands trembling, her breath sharp and uneven. The voices followed her into the corridor, echoing through the sterile halls, bouncing from wall to wall until it felt as though the entire hospital itself was chanting her name. She ran, her shoes striking hard against the polished floor, the sound of her own steps nearly drowned beneath the rising chorus that refused to let her go. The corridor stretched endlessly before her. What had always been a simple walk now became a labyrinth. Exit signs glowed faintly above her, promising escape, but as she drew closer, one by one, the lights flickered and died. The arrows that should have pointed her way out vanished into darkness, leaving her with only the long, repeating hallways and the unbearable silence that followed each flicker. She tried door after door, but every handle was locked, every ward sealed. No matter how far she ran, she always seemed to return to the same stretch of corridor, the one leading back toward the silent patient's room. Turning a corner, Elena stopped suddenly. Mounted high on the wall, the security monitors glowed, displaying footage from the cameras that lined the ICU. At first, she thought she had stumbled upon the guard's station, but then she saw what the screens showed. Not the past, not the present, the future. Each screen revealed her own movements seconds before she made them. A tilt of her head, a glance over her shoulder, the way her legs would soon push her forward. She watched in horror as her reflection in the monitor turned to face the camera, moments before she herself turned to face it in reality. It was as though the hospital had already decided her fate, replaying her choices before she could make them. She forced herself to run again, away from the monitors, away from the impossible loop of her own future. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her breath shallow and ragged, yet the halls did not end. They twisted, they repeated, they narrowed and widened, until she no longer knew whether she was inside a hospital or trapped within some endless reflection of one. Finally, at last, the corridor opened into the lobby. Relief rushed through her in a single breath. The vast glass walls stretched before her, the city lights twinkling beyond. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, desperate to feel the world outside. Her reflection stared back, pale, terrified, eyes wide. For a fleeting moment, she believed she had made it, that she was free. And then her reflection changed. The figure in the glass was not her. The posture was the same, the hand pressed against the pane in the same desperate angle. But the face was different. Bloodshot eyes, lips shut tight, a face pale and lifeless. It was the silent patient staring back at her, mimicking her every move. Elena staggered back, but the figure in the glass did not retreat. It pressed closer, forehead against the glass, eyes unblinking, lips trembling as though about to speak. But no words came, only silence, a silence heavier than any scream. And in that silence, Elena realized the truth. She had not escaped the patient's room. The patient's room had followed her. If you were Elena, would you keep running, or would you turn back? Comment your answer below. No one saw Elena leave Cleveland Clinic London that night. The cameras, the staff, the logs, all showed nothing unusual. Her shift had ended, her duties completed, and yet, she never walked through the doors again. Her name faded from the roster, her belongings cleared from the locker room. But her hospital badge, it was never returned. Even now, if you swipe it at the ICU entrance, the door will unlock. The green light will blink. The system will welcome her inside. But Elena is not there to walk through. She has not been seen, not been heard, not been traced. To the world outside, she simply vanished. To those inside, her name is still whispered in the halls. As for the patient herself, the bed remains occupied. Sheets are drawn. Monitors display steady signals. But when staff are asked who lies there, they hesitate. Some refuse to answer. Others insist they cannot recall. It is as if the room itself erases memory, wiping away the truth before it can be spoken. Official records list the bed as filled, but the name attached changes from file to file, as though no one is willing or able to commit to who remains within it. When new staff are hired, the story is never explained. They are warned only to respect the room, to keep their distance, to follow routine without question. Those who press further often transfer quickly. Others resign altogether. The rare few who remain admit, in whispers, that they sometimes hear her. Not in the patient's voice, not in any voice they know, but in their own, whispering from behind, echoing from walls, calling to them by name, as if she already knows who they are and how they will end. For Cleveland Clinic London, the story of the silent patient is not found in files or reports or archives. It survives only in the memories of those who dared to stay too long in her presence. For them, the silence is never truly gone. It lingers in stairwells, it waits in empty wards, and sometimes late at night, it follows them home. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: the silence does not stop at the walls of the hospital. It reaches further, to anyone who listens, anyone who watches, anyone who now knows her story. And if you have heard her once, you will hear her again. I hear you. Don't leave this video without subscribing, unless you're ready to hear her voice tonight.